What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Renegade Marquee on the Renegade Pop Culture Podcast Network. My name is Mike, and joining me, as always, is the Streamin Demon, Jacob.
What's up, y'all?
And making her Renegade Pop Culture debut, please welcome Haley.
Hi. Hello.
And joining us a little bit later, we've got Josh and Crystal. Today is a very special podcast. We are talking about Mike Flanagan's latest horror series on Netflix called Midnight Mass. This is one that I've been excited for pretty much since it was announced, and I know this is one that he's been wanting to get off the ground for well over a decade. First starting off as a novel. Then at one point it was going to be a movie, and then obviously now we have the series as it is presented. So Haley, since you're new here, I want to first ask your general impressions of Mike Flanagan as a filmmaker.
He's honestly one of my favorite horror filmmakers of this generation of horror. I really love his style. It's right up my alley, and I know why people have problems with his style and his form, but it's so for me, and I really love his work. I love the work he puts into the representation in his films, and I just generally love his storytelling.
Yeah, I think I agree with a lot of that. He's one of those filmmakers that takes he takes the material that he's given and pretty much elevates it to the next level. I think the very first thing I ever saw from him is the prequel movie Ouija Origin of Evil, which I had little to no expectations for, but just on a whim, I went to my local multiplex, went in with zero expectations and was honestly just blown away. And from there, now I haven't seen everything yet. I still need to see Oculus and Hush, but from there I watched both his other shows, The Haunting of Hill House, which is just still one of the greatest single seasons of television ever.
Yeah.
And then while he didn't direct all of Bly Manor, he still did the pilot and set the tone for the series. That's another one that I enjoyed. And of course, on film, I think one of his masterpieces is Dr. Sleep, which is probably one of the best Stephen King adaptations as well.
Definitely.
Now we are the two Flanagan aficionados, but the other half of the panel are let's say a little bit more green. Jacob, I'll start with you. Your exposure to Mike Flanagan.
God, I really have to see Dr. Sleep now.
Yes, you definitely need to see it.
I'm kicking myself for not seeing that before. God.
And make sure you watch the director's cut, because
okay, yeah, noted. But oh god, oh man, that may be more a little bit more of my speed. I did like Midnight Mass, okay, but I do think Dr. Sleep looks more like my expertise, like what I used to, engaging with, because I'm just more of a movie person than a mini. I'm just gonna say that right in front. I'm more of a movie person than I am a miniseries person, or just TV in general. But he seems, from what I've seen of Midnight Mass, he is a talented dude, and that gives me more of a drive to check out, his portfolio. I will carve out time to check out Doctor Sleep. I swear to God. Okay. And I'll try to talk about it on this podcast as soon as I can. But overall, this was a good introduction to me.
Excellent. Now, Josh, what about you? I've heard this is also your first Flanagan exposure.
Hey, Josh.
Hey, Jacob. Hey, Haley.
Hi.
Well, it's I gotta say, yeah, this was my very first Mike Flanagan joint, as it were. I heard so many good things about him over the years from damn near everybody. I kept getting everybody, and not my mother because she doesn't like horror, but everybody was recommending Haunting on Hill House, and of course, resident guest of the podcast, Gwendolyn J. Stone, shout out to her, always told me in particular that I would love Dr. Sleep more because, well, I kind of share the same hot take with her in that I've never really held The Shining in high regard.
Ah!
I know that
Oh
that
my
is
God.
sacrilege, but
No, I'm not mad at that.
Well, I'll tell you one thing with Midnight Mass, it's definitely got me hooked because I'm in love with this guy's I'm in love with Mike Flanagan's writing and direction, and from what I've seen, he even edits his own stuff, and that is mind-blowing to me, just in the sense because we'll get into it later on, but one thing that I can't give this series and Mike Flanagan's direction enough credit is that it is so well paced. It's not even funny. Like for me, I don't know, he just knows how to properly build tension while also knowing how to like hook people in. And a large part of that comes down to his own editing. And I'll be real with you guys, Midnight Mass is my favorite thing that I've seen this year. It blew me away, and I actually wept like a baby in the last 5 minutes.
Those last 5 minutes are truly something special, and we will certainly get into that more. As far as my thoughts on the series, yeah, outside of Dr. Sleep, which I think is his masterpiece in film, I think Midnight Mass, granted, I'm speaking from recency bias, I think this might be his masterpiece in long form media. The Haunting of Hill House is still like it's still perfection for what it was, but I think what puts Midnight Mass over the edge is this is like a wholly original concept that he's been building for well over a decade, and B, it has all those like sort of Stephen King-esque tropes to it, and Stephen King himself even said the hype is real. I don't know. There's just something about this that I just found incredibly compelling.
Mike Flanagan knows how to do compelling. His work has given me some of the most visceral reactions I've ever had to any type of media. He just knows how to get right at your heart and really like pull out those deepest, darkest feelings.
That he does.
I don't know if it's the same across all his works, but there's just something about how uncomfortable he's willing to get.
Oh yeah.
Just in the sense, like there's a scene in episode 2 that I'm frankly surprised that they even did, just in that sense, because I guess there's a hint of that kind of fatality, like at the end of the very first episode, and even in the very first episode with another with an animal. Spoiler alert: if you're PETA, you're probably going to hate this movie. But the scene during the crock pot, and that happens. I was just shocked that A, he went there, and B, that he held on it for as long as he did, to the point where I felt heartbroken. And that was a character, the character that the animal had a relation to. I wasn't on board with that particular character at first. They grew
Until
on me,
that.
but just yeah, like at that moment, that's the moment that made me love that particular character.
So I should have said this at the top. We're not holding back. We are going to talk about all the spoilers, and we kind of have to for the things that happen, especially towards the second half.
Yeah.
But before we get there, I do kind of want to address one criticism that I've been seeing floating around, and it is kind of regarding the pacing. A lot of people think like the first couple episodes are a little too slow. And while I understand why they may think that way, I disagree that that's a bad thing, because what Flanagan does is he uses that time to establish the setting, get to know these characters, and you get to really you get to hone in exactly on their what's going on in their heads and how they're feeling, and especially Riley, played brilliantly by Zach Gilford. You understand exactly where he's coming from and how he's feeling coming home after being away for so long.
One thing I'll give about the pacing of the introduction is, yes, it is probably the slowest out of his two other series, and I'm only going to reference his other miniseries rather than movies when it comes to pacing, because movie pacing, TV pacing, very different things. If we think about it, this is the most background and setting that he's had to really lay the groundwork for. He is laying the groundwork for an entire town, albeit a very small town. But his two previous works center around either just a household or a small family, a very small family. So in comparison, this is pretty big for what he's doing. So of course it is going to take a little bit of time. So if he's going to take his time and really like set the foundation of this, I'm okay with that. Okay, sure, the first episode didn't hook me as much as the first two series did, but it definitely created a more satisfying climax and ending.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with that. Jacob, how'd you feel as the not so enthusiastic miniseries consumer?
The only thing about miniseries is I'm all for slow pacing in movies, but it's different when it comes to a miniseries, because when the story is fragmented like that, it makes the slow pace a little more frustrating for me. It just feels like, if you are going to put it in chunks like that, then there has to be, the pace will have to be a little quicker if you want to get to like certain plot points and stuff, if what I'm saying makes sense. Like, it feels more like filler in a miniseries than it does in a movie. But this one, I did appreciate the slow, like when it's the conclusion, when Armageddon happens essentially on this island, that's when it really benefited from the slow pace. That and the conversations between Riley and the priest at those anonymous meetings, that the sense of the uncomfortable nature that arises from that. You know, whenever there's a scene between two characters, oh no, the slow when it just is there to envelop you in the emotions of the characters, that's where it drew its strength from. Because like the part where that girl in the wheelchair confronts the man whose dog Bob is his name, is it?
Joe.
Joe, sorry. Joe. She confronts Joe and she tells him how much she hates him and how much she wants him to live forever so he could feel the pain that she feels. And it all boils down to, but I still forgive you. That's when pacing, that's when it can be used effectively. And when you're just focusing on one particular scene and you just run with it. And that's what I got out of this series. I thought it benefited more than I might have seen from other miniseries, but from what little I have seen. So this kind of warned me to the idea that miniseries can be a format that when it's used properly, when slow pacing is used properly, then it can really heighten the emotions of the characters. Like it's more that pacing that I like from movies. I love slow burn movies. When it's utilized like it is in that format, in the miniseries format, then that's what I like about it.
And it's you brought up the dialogue scenes, and like you said, this is definitely where the strength of this show comes from. And I've said before that I could spend like an entire series just set in the rec center with the priest and Riley, just having a conversation about their two different ideologies.
Yeah.
It's funny you guys mentioned that, because I remember hearing, like, in the wake of all this, I knew I was going to watch Midnight Mass. I knew something about it said this is going to be my first exposure to Mike Flanagan. And I remember reading this article that basically detailed Mike Flanagan. It was a guest op-ed from him about how personal Midnight Mass was to him. And he talked about a long time ago, back in 2010 or 2011, he actually tried to turn Midnight Mass into a feature. And he got about 150 pages in when he finally had Riley and Father Hill's first AA meeting. And for listeners who don't know, a script is usually operated on a page equals a minute of screen time. So that would be the equivalent of, I believe, almost or over 3 hours of just building up to that. And he still wasn't to where, and for those who've seen the show, he wasn't nearly close enough to where everybody was at that point in like the end of the story. So that's when he realized, well, crap, this is going to be a bigger project than I thought. And
sorry.
And it's just, it really exposes to me. I kind of have the opposite feeling with Jacob when it comes to stuff like that, because no offense, Jacob. I mean, I completely understand where you're coming from. Like with a TV show, even if it's a mini series, it's got to grab you right away, you know? And I think back to like all the series that have like, you know, even if they go on for multiple seasons and each season is a different story, like True Detective or Fargo, etc., stuff like that. You know, they have to really work hard to get you to invest in that first episode, and then they can take their time in between before they get to the finale. But for me, when it comes to stuff like this, when I know that it's going to be a limited series, I really appreciate all the time that they take to just flesh everything out. Like, for my money, like, if I think about it, I would probably think True Detective wouldn't be as strong. Like, at least the first season, it wouldn't be as strong if it gets to like that big moment in episode 3 with the big oneer and everything, that wouldn't have nearly the same impact if it was rushed into episode 1. You know what I mean? Like it takes
Yeah.
that little slow, gradual buildup to get to that level of insanity.
One thing that I think is very interesting is we're talking about like how this is a more slow burn miniseries in comparison to the other two. It's also the shortest. And to
Really?
have, because yeah, this one's only 7 episodes.
Yep, the other 2 are 10, I believe.
Oh my god.
And it's, you wouldn't think that with the pacing. And somehow he still creates a full, well rounded story, again, with a much larger ensemble than his past 2 series. And I'm almost certain that if Mike Flanagan wanted more episodes or more screen time for this show, he probably would have gotten it. So I don't think it's because of like restraints or like budgeting or anything like that. He likely deliberately made that 7 episodes and still created such a well fleshed out story. And that
Yeah.
is really impressive to me.
Like the whole first episode just gives you the feeling of what it's like to be Riley in those first in that opening. Just real quick, I remember in that same article, that same op-ed, Mike Flanagan talked about how this was basically exploring his biggest fear when he was a full-blown alcoholic. And it was the idea of what if he killed somebody? Like he didn't like the person that he became when he was drunk. Like it would just become like a different person entirely. And he had this horrifying thought of what if he killed a person and lived? Not if he died drinking, but what if he killed somebody and lived onwards, like after that person? And I think nothing sets that up more than that perfect motif visually, where every time Riley's about to go to sleep, the camera starts tilting to where
Yeah,
it's
I love
almost
that.
vertical, and then it cuts to the dead body. Like just that's so perfect and unsettling. And
Mhm.
it's probably the best depiction I've ever seen of that kind of guilt ever. Like, of course, it would haunt them, but it wouldn't be like this thing where like they see it repeatedly over and over again, like the action, but they'd see the aftermath over and over, probably.
That's,
And
oh, sorry.
yeah, no, go ahead, go ahead.
I think that's another like trademark to Mike Flanagan is he tends to make the biggest, for lack of a better term, villains just the dark corners of your own brain.
Mhm.
And I love how that first episode it puts you in Riley's mind, and on top of that, it gives you such a perfect picture of what he's coming home to. You get an idea of why he wanted to run away from it before he even goes back. Before, like, because I'll admit, I went into this blind, but like, with the exception of the very first trailer, but I went into this blind and I immediately understood why he didn't want to go back to that town. And when they established that he left the town on his own, like he really wanted to get the fuck out of there, I totally understood why. Just they set up the isolation, the community perfectly. They set up how little there is to do, both ambition wise, as well as job wise, as well as socially, to the point where in that very first episode, as you're seeing it before Riley gets there and after he gets there, you just feel how stuck he is, and moreover, how he's forced to go back there. And one thing that I really love, and this is what I mean when I say I appreciate slow burns in these miniseries, because I know if they have a limited episode count, they're going to build up to something. And what I really appreciate is that Mike, along with his team of writers, their names escape me, but I know one of them is his brother.
Mhm.
Um, they have a lot to set up in those first 2 episodes that pay off brilliantly in the episodes to come. Like, I remember in episode 5, they set up this motif in the very first episode, and I think the second episode, where when Riley goes to sleep, in addition to the nightmare that he sees of the dead body like staring at him, I remember they set up this dream where he's on the water in a boat, and it looks surreal. It looks not real. And I remember thinking in my mind, okay, this looks intentionally uncanny valley with its CGI. It's got to build to something. And he talks about how at the end of the dream, the sun he's on a boat and he's going somewhere, and the sun rises. And the second it rises, he wakes up. And I'll admit, at the time, I didn't know where that was going. But there was a part of me that was thinking, stick with that. It's going to pay off in some way.
And
then
boy, does it pay off.
Yeah, it does.
You get to episode 5. And when you get to episode 5, that's where the payoff of that happens. In fact, I saw it coming right after episode 4, like, oh shit, that might be where it's going to happen. And sure enough, it does. And it's so perfect. But it's not even that. It's just little things like setting up character relationships, like the sheriff, or, in my opinion, one of the best villains to ever grace any screen ever, Bev Keane.
Oh,
Which, holy crap, I have never hated a character more in my entire life. And I think back to characters like Miss Trunchbull and Matilda or something like that.
And Dolores Umbridge.
And Dolores Umbridge, but none of them have made me want to punch my TV, even though I never would because this thing cost almost $500. They never made me want to punch my TV more than Beverly Keane, which I hear that the actress is one of the nicest people in the world, and I totally believe that. But
it's always the
man,
nicest people that can play the most evil characters.
Yeah.
like, they set her up just by name in the first episode. Just with her talking about the Uppins, just her saying that to Riley's younger brother, and that, oh, like, only bad things happen in the Uppins, this and that. And I was already thinking, oh my god, ugh. But then when they show her when the dog's barking, and she's like, it leapt at me, it snapped right at me. I was just thinking, oh, it's going to be this kind of character. Okay.
She gives Karen a completely different definition.
Karens hate this character. That's how much of a Karen she is.
So, fun fact about this character, and I just watched it chapter 1 for the first time since it came out. And I realized this was intentional. Her name is inspired by it because Beverly, as the character in it as well, and the pharmacist is Mr. Keene. So it's a combination, Bev Keane. And I'm watching the movie and I'm like, oh my God, Bev Keane. And that's just a fun little tidbit of just a little detail that Mike Flanagan sprinkled in there.
And that's something that I really like about Mike Flanagan. Like I said, I wanted this to be my first exposure. But the reason why is because I kept hearing about how personal it was, how much of a passion project it was. And I'm not familiar with all of his work, but I can see the influences that he's wearing on his sleeve, but they never feel overpowering to the larger narrative. Like, you see a lot of criticism for people like Quentin Tarantino. And if we're talking about the TV realm, I guess you could say the same thing about Noah Hawley, just in the fact that they wear so much of what they're inspired by on their sleeves. You see exactly what they're trying to be. You could
Mike,
even say the same for J.J. Abrams, I think.
yeah, Mike Flanagan really knows how to balance um, kind of making these little love notes to the people who's inspired him while still having his own unique content that people will later be deeply inspired by. And we will be seeing translations of that in future films and TV shows.
I wouldn't be surprised if this show becomes like a huge inspiration for an entire generation of film students. But
Definitely.
I would be welcome to it if they're half as good as this, because even though he uses like he's clearly inspired by Stephen King, I'm assuming. Like in addition to writing Doctor Sleep to directing Doctor Sleep and Gerald's Game. And I noticed that there were a few Stephen King books as props in Midnight Mass in particular, in Riley's room, and one of the books that his dad is reading, which I didn't even realize that was Henry Thomas. Holy crap.
I don't know if this is me
Yeah.
reading too far into things and being obsessed with like classic pre 1960s horror, but I see a lot of classic horror storytelling techniques in Mike Flanagan's work.
I can see a little
Really?
bit of that as well. Little like maybe a little bit of
Especially
Hitchcock.
especially like in his dialogue, because so many of those films, when you were very limited on effects and stuff, relied on the acting performances and the dialogue to convey the true horror of everything. He
I
seems to do
gotta
that very similarly.
I gotta say, like, I kept seeing Henry Thomas's name in the credits, and I was like, who? I was like racking my brain. Who could he have possibly played in this? Like, could he have played Riley's dad? And like, no. And then, holy shit! You guys just opened my eyes. Like, I did not know that. I would never have guessed that.
Yeah, I watched
That
that
is
with,
as far from. Obviously, he's not going to be the same person now. He's not going to be playing the same roles like he did in E.T. But it's just it's fascinating because that is not. That just blows my mind. It honestly does.
Oh, Henry Thomas has appeared in almost all of well, if we're just talking about TV series, he was one of the main characters in The Haunting of Hill House, and he also had a recurring role in The Haunting of Bly Manor.
He was also in Better Things with Pamela Adlon. He was in the second season. He was a recurring love interest. And I remember thinking, why does this guy look so familiar? And then I looked it up and I didn't realize, holy crap, that's the little boy from E.T.
yeah,
So I guess like acting talent like carries on when you're older. I mean, I figured that would be obvious with people like Joseph Gordon-Levitt or, Brie Larson, but oh, my God, I hadn't seen anything of his in quite some time. So seeing him in a role like this, and I found this out because I had seen clips of it before. But Jacob, it's really interesting. He plays Jack Torrance in Doctor Sleep.
I've seen deleted scenes of that. I've seen up on the director's cut apparently where Ewan McGregor plays Danny and he's in that bar with his father who's taking on the role because clearly they couldn't get Jack Nicholson for that. That's interesting. And we got, since you brought it up, Josh, why didn't you like about The Shining?
Okay, if we're gonna get into that real quick,
oh, I'd
because
love to hear this.
I want to say this real quick. I love Kubrick. Like, I think he is a filmmaking genius. Do I approve of his methods as a filmmaker? No. Personally speaking, I'm not a perfectionist like that. If I can get a take really good, I'll get it right away. If it takes a while, it'll take a while. But if I'm on a take like 127 times, there's something wrong with me personally. That might be my personal filmmaking philosophy, I know I'm not alone in that, but I know that there are some like David Fincher who will be perfectionists.
I feel like if you have to
Oh,
permanently traumatize your actors to
Shelley
get a good
Duvall, yeah.
shot,
Yeah,
Her
you're
haircut
not a
falling
good
out.
filmmaker. You're just a terrifying person.
That's
Mhm.
yeah.
Because you're not relying on acting at that point. You're relying on actual emotions that ruin people for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, Josh, I'm not I totally understand that. But and I'm not trying to mitigate your that is a legitimate concern, but is that your main problem with The Shining?
it's not that. It's just well,
Like if you strip
okay.
that away, would you appreciate The Shining more?
No, I definitely appreciate it, but do I like it? I don't because quite frankly, of all of Kubrick's films, I found it the least visually engaging.
Okay.
On top of that, as a horror film, I feel like I'm showing my ass a little bit with this, but as a horror film, I don't feel it primarily in that sense. It doesn't disturb me. It doesn't make me it doesn't give me that unsettling feeling that I get with any film trying to be horror in that sense. It just I see the themes that it's trying to tackle. But I just think that in a sense Kubrick was too cold in his vision to properly execute those themes, if that makes sense.
I think that's actually a fair assessment. And I say this as someone who is a big fan of The Shining. I've as I've gotten older, I've started to see a little bit more of the other side. And cold is probably the best way to describe Kubrick's approach to the material, which is why I think Doctor Sleep is in almost every way the superior film of the two.
Like I imagine Doctor Sleep is probably better written too, like not only as an adaptation, which I completely understand why Stephen King doesn't like Kubrick's Shining. And I imagine there's a part of him that even resents the fact that The Shining is seen as this landmark of film. Rightfully so, because I can see the artistry behind it. Like I said, I appreciate it completely. But I can also understand, like, from a writing perspective, where King would probably feel really disappointed by it. And like I said, when it comes to the themes, I think Kubrick just wanted to play things so matter of factly without delving into the thing that I think makes King's work so compelling, which is the fact that King really does like to play with the supernatural in a unique way. I say this as someone that's really only read a handful of King stuff, but I've seen a lot of adaptations. And what I like about him, and in the sense, I guess also what I really like about Mike Flanagan, is that they take stuff that's standard in supernatural fiction, but they're able to just use it as a launching point to do some really unique stuff with it. Like from what I read, how Pet Cemetery is a beautiful and horrifying exploration into grief after a loved one has passed away, or in Misery with how, toxic fandoms, even back then, he kind of predicted how extreme that can go, that kind of adoration and blind fanaticism. And then, of course, there's it and the horror of childhood and how that can kind of creep under the surface and even carry over into adulthood. And I think that's where, if you guys are okay with it, I think we can reveal the kind of big development in Midnight Mass.
I was getting there. So yeah, I did warn you guys this episode is going to be spoilers. So vampires.
Woo!
There is no other way to describe the blood sucking demonic creatures And I think one of my favorite things about this series is that not once are the words vampire or demon or devil ever spoken in a single line of dialogue.
And that is intentional.
Yep. Just like how in The Walking Dead, nobody refers to the walkers as zombies.
They don't say the Z word.
Nope.
Yeah.
So even though they don't say vampire, we know vampire. And with that being said, I just have to say, as someone who's obsessed with all things vampire, I really love this flavor of vampire that Mike Flanagan did. Because if you've seen vampire films before, every single film, TV show, book has its own take on the type of creature, with where it has its own powers, its own downfalls. The way Mike Flanagan picked what vampires can do and what limits them, I think was perfect.
Yes.
And it was, I was in love with that, because I'm very picky when it comes to like how vampires are seen. And I'm very like pulling apart at all the details. I love this so much.
It's so unique, isn't it? Like,
It's unique while still being classic.
yeah.
I was like when they appeared, I was more like, wait, so they're obviously they had the same traits as vampires, but is it really accurate to describe themselves as, are they like a different species that I've just never heard of, like this type of mythological creature? But it's very encouraging to know that, you know, they're vampires. They're not uncultured, Jacob. They are in fact vampires.
it borrows heavily from Nosferatu. Like, I
Yes.
see
Yeah.
so
Yes.
much F.W. Murnau in the design alone, but at the same time, how it contorts itself to just being seen as a classical vampire, while also blending perfectly with the themes of religion throughout the entire series. Like, you could see it perfectly. Like, even though they don't say vampire, that's the first thing your mind goes to, but you could even see it as an extension of probably what they describe in the series as what an angel might be.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's definitely something that Mike Flanagan forces us to kind of come up with the answer ourselves with our own backgrounds of not even just faith alone, but like
And
horror in general, and like general knowledge about just different creatures, whether they be demonic or whatever.
and that's where the beauty of resting on those first two episodes pays off completely. Not just in, spoiler alert, how they completely consume Riley, and you get to see him go through that, but also just in small little character moments that you think aren't going to amount to much. Like, they set up early on that when Paul Hill, which I guess if we're jumping this far into the season, spoiler alert for everybody, they mentioned that there's this old Monsignor that went to a retreat in Jerusalem. And while he was there, you know, this new guy, Father Paul Hill, which I knew in the outset when they introduced the character, I was thinking in my mind, that's a really bad name.
Like an obvious nom de plume.
Like Crystal makes fun of the fact that which Crystal isn't here for this episode, unfortunately, but she always makes fun of me with my writing, in that I'm okay with most everything else, but names I'm terrible at. In a D&D thing that I did for Star Wars, I named a character Rooster Skybound, and that's because I saw a ceramic rooster in the same room. That's my level of name calling. And I even I picked up on Paul Hill, and I thought, really, Mike, you couldn't come up with a better name? But then they explained that this Monsignor was confronted by the quote unquote angel in the catacombs in Jerusalem. And it turns out that Father Paul Hill is actually Joseph Pruitt, the Monsignor of Crockett Island.
So, Josh, I have to ask, before it was officially revealed, how soon did you suspect, aside from when you first hear his name, like how soon after that did you suspect that that Paul Hill was hiding something? Because at the start of episode 3, we see him in the in confession saying like, "Forgive me, Father, not because I have sinned, but because I am going to sin. I am going to lie about their beloved Monsignor." Did you think in that moment like, okay, something is up?
It wasn't even that episode. I don't think it was in that episode, but that's what I mean with those first 2 episodes setting everything up. Because I think it was either at the end of the first episode or actually, no, I think it was in the second episode, just before the girl in the wheelchair, he gets her to walk. But if I remember correctly, there's a bit where Riley's brother walks back into the back of the church and he sees Pruitt, or he sees Hill pouring more of the communion wine from a flask.
Oh.
And that little seed, that was immediately enough to get me thinking, okay, there's something up with him. I think there's something going on much deeper than this. And,
okay, yeah, that makes sense.
And I love that payoff with that, because after the vampires revealed, after the angels revealed, and the blood of the angel, I just thought, oh, that explains it. Oh shit. And even that little visual of the father drinking, like being implied to be a quote unquote drinker, pays off not only in that reveal, but even in the episode but even before then, where what was the name of the man with the dog? It was
Joe Collins.
Joe Collins, yeah,
or
yeah.
Collie, sorry.
Collie, he walks in on Pruitt drinking from the wine right after he couldn't bring himself to buy another bottle of beer. Like, just that little thing. And then on top of that, I'm sorry, I'm gushing way too long, but just forcing Riley to be like Pruitt, having him be a vampire and having him be driven by that, forcing him to confront the blood hunger that comes with that. What a perfect way to tie back into Riley's alcoholism and just the themes of like confronting that dark side of yourself, the vice that's very self-destructive and could harm the people that you love, especially right after that beautiful scene where him and Aaron Green, played by Kate Siegel, who I found out was Mike Flanagan's wife, and oh my god, not only is she stunning, but she's probably one of the best actors in the whole show, and that is saying something.
Can I brag for a second?
Go for it.
I've met her in real life.
Whoa.
So there's a convention that is in this area called Monster Mania. A lot of horror-related actors go there, and Katie Siegel was there, and she wasn't even like a headlining person there. Like Ron Perlman was there, Stephen Yeun was there. I was only interested in seeing Katie Siegel. Literally no one else. She had no line. This was right after Haunting of Hill House came out. And I was like, I need to meet Theo. And because not to be all like personal or anything, but being a lesbian, seeing a lesbian character, I was like, I need to see her in person. That character really resonated with me. I saw her in person, and immediately she goes, wow, you remind me a lot of Theo. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And she is surprisingly short in person, and she has the sweetest voice when she's not acting, which, if you watch Haunting of Hill House, was kind of surprising, because if Theo's character was a little more like edgy and like pessimistic. So to see like this bright little ray of sunshine and be like, "Oh, hi, hello. You remind me of this character," is very jarring. And
Aw.
but she was so sweet. She was such a doll. I absolutely adore her. And seeing her in this after meeting her, I was like, "That's my girl. That's my girl. I love her. Oh my god."
Oh, that is so cool.
Mm.
That is awesome. And I'm gonna admit I'm jealous of you, because I swear to God, if people aren't already banging on every single actor that was in this show's door, they better be. That's a line that I've used way too many times in my reviews for the site, but I mean it every time I say it. You know, with the Suicide Squad, you have Daniela Melchior. With Malignant, you have Annabelle Wallace, I think is her name.
Yep.
And with Shang-Chi, it was Simu Liu. But this one, I swear to God, I can't even. I say that she's one of the best actors, if not the best actor in the whole show. But
Yeah.
every single actor in this is at the top of their game. Hamish Linklater, who I ended up finding out I don't think is related to Richard Linklater.
No relation. I tried looking it up myself, couldn't find anything.
I felt like a big idiot for thinking that for the longest time, ever since I saw Fargo season 3, even Legion. But I swear to God, this is his best performance. Just the vulnerability that he gives in the very last episode is just so perfect. There's the main actor, which I swear to God, I made notes thinking, all right, if I make it big in Hollywood, I know to hire him.
Yeah.
And then there's the sheriff. I'm gonna hire him.
Rahul Kohli.
He's incredible.
That's another thing with Katie Siegel, is seeing her, I think it was 2019. A picture with her was only $20, and there was literally no one in line for her. I can imagine her now, after this, being a headline actress for one of these conventions. And for reference, if you haven't been to a horror convention before, I've been in a wait line for Matthew Lillard that was 4 hours long.
Oh my God.
I wouldn't see maybe like a 4 hour wait. She deserves like an all day wait though. But if she comes to conventions again, I expect to see a long line waiting for her, because she is amazing and she deserves all of the accolades.
I was at a Doug Jones line and I waited an hour and a half.
I can totally believe that. Like I'm not too dialed into horror as much as the other genres. Like I've admitted this before in the podcast and especially on my channel, but I also believe in that horror has such a strong fandom to the point where any actor that has been in quite a few horror movies will definitely inspire a long line, from people like Doug Jones to Nev Campbell to even Bruce Campbell,
Especially Bruce Campbell.
Oh yeah.
That would be a line around the block.
Yeah.
Oh,
just
absolutely.
for that boot.
But like even that, like just these actors in particular, they're only as good as what they're given. And the one thing that I really love about this show, especially as it goes on, it's just the way that Mike Flanagan respects these characters.
He treats these characters like people first, characters second. And again, going back to those first two episodes, it's really important that you get to know these people, just like you're a fly on the wall in the church, or like the Flynn household. So you really get to understand like who these people are and what this town is all about.
It almost feels like calling them characters is selling them short, because they really do feel like real people that you form like real attachments with and have a lasting impact on your life.
That's why I prefer Ghibli much more than Pixar.
Yeah, just in the sense that they feel like people that you'd see right outside your home.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, just in how, I won't get into that just yet. I want to save that for just a little bit later, but just in the sense that Mike Flanagan respects that these are very diverse characters, not just in ethnicity and race, but also in faith.
Yeah, that's something I wanted to touch on next, because the character that Rahul Kohli plays, Sheriff Omar Hassan, he's a Muslim, and the only Muslim who happens to be the sheriff in a town completely full of Christians.
Well, Catholic, technically.
Catholics, sure. But it's just interesting how what makes a show so unique is that it's not necessarily preaching like one particular theology. It's like every moment between like characters with different ideologies is a conversation, not just like two monologues thrown at each other. And I mean, there aren't a lot of monologues, but everyone gets their moment to say their piece.
This is actually a perfect time for me to bring up my theory regarding the enjoyability of this show. Because so far, out of the two people that I know that have watched it to completion, it has applied. Or three, including myself. And this is going to be a personal question, so if you don't feel comfortable answering, no worries. But I would like to ask the rest of the panel, one by one, what is your personal relationship with just religion in general?
I guess
we're going here
because I really think it has a link to the impact this show could have.
We were just talking about it before we recorded, how this show is the perfect Rorschach test, and it really, like, any reaction to this show is perfectly valid. It's something I can't even say that about most art about religion, because it's this hits that balance, exploring religion and atheism in a way I don't think I've seen as well done as any other piece of art. So yeah, absolutely. Like, it absolutely, your mileage will definitely vary on this one, and all for the best.
So my answer is a little bit interesting, because I actually have two answers: my personal answer and my heritage. So growing up, my mom is raised Catholic, and my dad is Jewish. So as a child, I kind of had the best of both worlds. Well, the best and worst. Sunday school and religion classes were very not fun. But as I got older, I've I've become. I don't want to call myself an atheist because, in my opinion, atheism is just as much a religion as something like Judaism or Christianity. I believe atheism is like a pretty defiant God does not exist. For me personally, I'm more agnostic. Like I believe there is a higher power out there. I just don't necessarily subscribe to a specific organized religion.
For me personally, it's funny. My parents are very much of the belief that like whatever your faith is, it's personal to you. It's with you. It's not with any practice or whatever. So I never really went to church because of them. However, my best friend in school had very religious parents, and they insisted I go to church with them. So for a couple of years, every Sunday, with my best friend, I would go to church, which meant I had a strong connection with Christianity, even though it didn't carry me into adulthood. And when watching this, it really tied into those roots that I grew, that like dug into the ground when I was like from around 10 to 13 years old. Whereas my girlfriend Brianna, who watched it, she never went to church other than for like weddings and funerals. And she just didn't like, she was just saying how it didn't like hit her as hard as it did me or her mother, who was raised Catholic. And that's and I want to see if this continues down the panel, if that tends to be a pattern of your connection to the show and your past connection with religion, whether it still exists to this day or not.
Jacob, you want to go next?
I'll go next. I grew up in a Christian family, but it wasn't like my family, they identified as Christian, but they stopped going to church. After my mom, she was raised Catholic. She has bad experience with it. And that separation from religion, basically, like I was kind of pressured into professing a belief in God. It wasn't until I was 19 that I identified as atheist. I started identifying with that. I just kind of, I have all these questions about God, and none of the answers I came across were satisfactory. Okay. And then I was a closet atheist, and it felt really good. And that lasted for about 7 years or so. Have you guys noticed the recent climate, like the perception of atheists today? A lot of because did you guys notice a few years ago a lot of atheists on YouTube kind of joined the anti-SJW bandwagon?
Huh. I didn't necessarily connect the dots between atheism and anti-SJWs.
Well, it's more common. Like one, I think we're all familiar with one amazing atheist, for example.
Oh, yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, and certain other figures like Armored Skeptic and Thunderfoot and Sargon of Akkad, those kind of people. Even like the more prominent atheists like Richard Dawkins. Have you guys seen what he's tweeted lately?
I haven't seeked it out personally.
Well, this is just one example of the kind of stuff he said. Okay. Like this is kind of unbelievable. He actually said this on Twitter, Richard Dawkins. He says, "It's one thing to deplore eugenics on ideological, political, moral grounds. It's quite another to conclude that it wouldn't work in practice. Of course it would. It works for cows, horses, pigs, dogs, and roses. Why on earth wouldn't it work for humans? Facts ignore ideology.
Yeah,
Ugh.
that gives
Yeah.
atheism a bad name.
Yeah,
So-
like when that's one of our prominent voices
Like-
within. Yeah.
My question.
Also,
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. What? You
My
go, Haley.
question is for you, like, with any of your connections with religion in your past, do you think that influenced how you watched the show?
Well, I went from, after seeing how toxic atheism can be, like the toxic like internet atheism. I kind of stopped. I kind of gave that atheism a break. I just kind of set that aside. I'm not really that. But then there came a point in my life where I was in a really dark place, okay, mentally. And that opened up to the idea that there is a God. So, just because I needed something to give me meaning in my life, when you're on the autistic spectrum, you like I am, you kind of, you want there to be a source of, that someone made you exactly as you are, and they don't judge you. They love you enough to have created you, and that's kind of what Christian, in a very broad sense. I'm not. I still retain some beliefs from. I still believe in evolution, for example. I still don't believe that creationism should be taught in science classes, for instance. I don't think that religious monuments should be built on, government buildings. I think there should be a clear separation between church and state. Absolute. 100% on board on that. I still retain a lot of my progressive ideas from my atheism. Like, weirdly enough, I am more liberal as a Christian than I ever was as an atheist, if that makes any sense.
Did
I
that?
can understand that.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I was, going to the recent church. Crystal, she kind of has a similar. I know this much. She kind of. It's similar with her, but it's similar. There's this church I go to. The pastor there is an incredible guy. He's a right-leaning guy, but he is super chill about political differences. Like, he stresses at the church constantly that we have to respect Christians who think differently from us. And I've had retreats. I went to a retreat where finding solitude in a way. So about finding inner peace, with got mental clarity, that was really important to me. And I even got baptized recently. That meant a lot to me. And honestly, that did kind of impact how I interpreted this show, because it did kind of have like that talk when Riley and that lady who was at one time pregnant with a baby, but then the baby mysteriously disappeared. We find out why later on, but she talks about what God means to her. What God means to her is that she has something to look forward to when she dies.
Yeah, and
that's a summary of what I personally believe, because I know where Riley was at one point. I thought there was beauty in accepting that there wasn't an afterlife, but that scene was my favorite, actually, because that was when they're just talking about what they think happens after they die, and that scene is just the perfect Rosetta Stone of what works about this show because of that balance. This hits it right at the park when it comes to that debate. I did, because I did like her interpretation of heaven a little more than I liked Riley's. Needless to say, but and then later it's kind of as Riley, she kind of revisits that scene at the very end where she has this big spiel about You know, how we're all atoms, you know, we're all energy, like we're the cosmos made into being. And there is a lot of poetry in that, but it didn't have that much of an impact on me because I already hear that belief as an atheist, and it doesn't personally have that much power. It doesn't strike me as much. I have heard that from Carl Sagan's speeches, for instance. I would hear audio recording of Carl Sagan explaining how we are the arbiters of life's meaning, or and things like that. But yeah, I do side with her original speech a little bit more than the final one. Okay, Josh, the floor is yours.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because like how you draw the comparisons to Carl Sagan, because in that same op-ed that Mike Flanagan wrote, he talks about how he looked for God everywhere. He looked in the Bible, the Quran, every piece of religious text, and he admitted that he got more of a spiritual reaction reading, I believe it was Pale Blue Dot by Carl Sagan. So it's kind of interesting that you draw that same comparison. Now, I'm going to get into this a lot more in probably more eloquent detail in an editorial for the site, which I haven't finished yet because I haven't had the time, but it's called Midnight Mass and the Beauty of Faith, which, depending on when this episode will be up, it may be uploaded at the same time as this particular episode. But my relationship with faith is kind of on the same level as Jacob. I would say that it definitely influenced me, though, as I was watching. And it definitely influenced Crystal, too. Like I said, the last 5 minutes, I was a weeping mess, even to the point that I watched the credits so that way I could just sit with the euphoric feeling that I got at the end of it. And this is largely because I've always struggled with... Okay, well, I'll admit, at the time, I was very comfortable calling myself an atheist. I wouldn't say that I fully understood what it was, but I understood like the idea of atheism, and it was to the extent that I kind of adopted that identity. And just like how Jacob talks about, there were pillars in the skeptic community, as it's known on YouTube. People like Jacqueline Glenn, The Amazing Atheist, Mr. Repzion, Sargon of Akkad, etc. I watched them all the time, and it was right around that pivotal point in US history where social justice was on the rise, and on top of that, there was a lot of pushback from it. And I've admitted this on the show a couple times, I think, especially on the mental health podcasts or on the Free for All. But I used to be one of those people. I'm thankful I'm not anymore. And I think that's where it comes down to with my own religious views, my own spiritual views, because I wouldn't know if I could assign myself a particular class or particular subsection of religion, but I'd consider myself a believer in empathy. Just, I want to believe in the good of people no matter what.
Like ultimately, that's where I fall.
Yeah, and it just really struck me, especially seeing how atheists talk about, when they talk about what life is after death, typically, they talk about, well, we become one with the earth, we're worm food. But they talk about it in such a way that there's no beauty behind it. It's a very cynical view to look at it. And I used to think that. I used to think, well, nothing special happens. We just stop. We cease to be. And I never elaborated further with that. But one thing that really struck me with this series, because I've seen it so many times when people tackle religion, and maybe it was part of why I was so keen to see Mike Flanagan touch on this, for this to be my very first exposure to him, my overall reason. Tackling religion in art is a very, very tight rope to walk on.
Definitely.
Because if you lean too far to the left, you're going to come across as very cynical. And to lean too far to the right, you're going to come across as very preachy. I think this may be a good indication of where I am with this. But before I saw this series, my two pillars for how to do spirituality in media and fiction, the two things that I held in high esteem were Silence by Martin Scorsese and Fleabag by Phoebe Waller-Bridge. I don't know if that's a good indication of where I was jumping into this, but I've gone. Go ahead.
That's actually a really funny point to bring up, because I remember when obviously the term Midnight Mass, there's going to be Catholicism and there's going to be those overtones, but when it really started to lean into it, I got a little concerned, because the last thing I watched that really used Christianity and like the Bible heavily is, I'm going to give very mild spoilers for the show, but season 7 of Dexter, or season 6, 7, 6, 6 of Dexter, and that's where you saw the Doomsday Killers. And I remember seeing that and thinking it was that writing was so heavy-handed and so literal, because that's my one issue when you see writing inspired by the Bible, is that they tend to be so direct, like, hey, I see these verses, I'm going to literally spell these out for you. Whereas what Mike Flanagan did with this really surprised me, because it was much more subversive, it was much more open to interpretation, and it really relied on the viewers using their own imagination and their own system of beliefs to really get to you. And it didn't rely on like, hi, this is a direct Bible passage, we are going to play it onto the screen. It more brought the experience of religion and the experience of being around religious people, rather than being point A to point B in a very straight line without any nuance.
Exactly.
And I'm very impressed by that.
Like, the same can apply to people on the other end of the spectrum, where if you're fully religious and you want to bring that message, that beauty that faith can bring, because look, even I'm not blind to the fact that it's part of why I started going to church with Crystal. I honestly haven't gone in a while, but I understand the need for a community. And I understand that sometimes just being around people that believe in something that you don't can bring comfort. It can be very enlightening at some points to just go to church at certain points in the time. And if you're feeling lost, it can bring you some sort of comfort or relief. And sometimes it can take somebody just saying the right words at the right day to be able to lift your spirits. And that's what I adored about the monologues that Paul Hill / Joseph Pruitt would say during those things, because when I see church scenes, either in TV or in movies, usually, granted, it's done in a comedic sense, but I've seen it to the point where they make church so drab that you don't understand why anybody would want to go there. Or they make it sound like the priest has the complete supreme thesis for the work of art that you're dealing with, to the point where it's just like, okay, this is just a scene where the creator can go on their soapbox. But in the skeptic sense, when you see people tackle stuff like this, it's done in a way to make the religious people look like idiots. Like, I'll say this as something, and I know it's a complete like non sequitur with this, but one joke that absolutely sucks me out of the entire pilot of Disenchantment is the very low hanging fruit where it's like Princess Tia Bean's wedding, and like the priest says something to the effect of like, I can say whatever I want because you idiots will believe anything. It's such low hanging fruit, and that's what I mean when I say like the kind of approach that most skeptics would want this to go in. And I may be throwing some shade to a certain review that's out there about Midnight Mass. But the one thing I like about Mike Flanagan is he's very open about the fact that he is an atheist. That's what he identifies as, but he also sees himself on the side of empathy. So when he tackles these different religions in the show, we're talking Catholicism, Christianity, Islam, and even atheism. He doesn't do it to where Riley's worldview is seen as like the superior one. In fact, that's where I was worried in episode 5 when Riley becomes a vampire in that sense. Because I thought, oh no, he's going to take this thing. They even talked about him being a gift from God. This is going to be a win for the skeptic community. Like, oh man, I feel represented. But no, Riley understands that there is a darkness in all this, and what's done so brilliantly here, I've never seen fanaticism done so perfectly, where I understand why someone would blindly accept faith in this way to a toxic degree like Bev, until I've seen this show where Bev is literally the type of person that would look at something like that and see it as a sense of, well, this means that I can take control. I can be seen as good in the eyes of God. And that's where, in my opinion, the thesis statement for Midnight Mass doesn't come in until the very last episode, when Riley's mom confronts Bev and the other bearded guy. I forget his name.
Sturge.
But Sturge, yeah. And she says, you know what it is, Bev? You just can't accept the fact that God doesn't love you more than anyone else. That he loves Riley as much as you. And that's where, in my opinion, where my beauty in the show knows no bounds, and why I wept at the final 5 minutes, because even during that monologue, like I when Riley gives his thing, I was like, all right, that's where I used to believe in completely, where I used to fully give myself. And I can see it, but I haven't felt that in a long time. I haven't felt that kind of skepticism, and that when we die, and I give myself back to the earth, but that's it. That for me was initially lip service, because that was what I used to believe in. That was my original viewpoint as an atheist. But when Aaron starts talking about becoming, like, how we're balls of gas, we're stars, and that we're one with the universe, I am what I am, and all that. As she was talking, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe he's going here. And then not only that, he doesn't make her the standout. This is what I mean when I talk about the editing. And I think it also goes into his writing, how he structures it. I'm getting choked up talking about this, Jesus Christ. But he takes time in the middle of the monologue to cut to everyone else. Because, spoiler alert, this culminates in a Jonestown kind of situation where basically Pruitt wants everybody to drink the blood of the angel, so that way they can spread the word of God. But it turns out it's also for its own selfish reasons. For his own selfish reasons. Which is so perfect. and just the symbolism in the show in particular. I'm sorry, I keep diverging, but I swear to God, I'm going to an end point with this. I swear. But like I said, just in how this show can tackle so much about religion, and in the sense that it can be so easily corrupted and misinterpreted by people who don't get the right message from it, or who don't understand the words that are being spoken, and Bev more or less corrupting everybody and trying to preach this whole thing about how, well, I'm the pure one, and leading everybody to death at the very end of it. And also just in the sense that even with Pruitt, how altruistic intent like that can even be rooted in its own form of selfishness. But it's this moment it's in the final 5 minutes where, as Aaron's giving this monologue, we cut to everybody on the island, and everyone on the island is just preparing for death because the sun's about to come up, and you just see everyone start to get ready for death. And you see the Catholics of the island, most everybody, break out into hymns. And you see Omar and his son Ali on the beach, and they're praying. They're praying in the Muslim faith. And you see Pruitt and the doctor's mom, like just with their dead daughter on the bridge. And then you see Bev, the one who thought that she had the right answers all along, realizing that she was wrong the whole time.
And she's
quite
digging
literally
a
tries
hole
to
in the
bury her
sand.
head in the sand.
Yeah.
Like, she literally tries to bury her head in the sand, and then it intersperses with the monologue that Bev is saying, and it is so perfect in its execution that I'm frankly shocked that people are turned off by it, because it's the only time I've ever seen such beauty in the idea that we're all equal at the end of the day, no matter what you believe in, who you believe in. We all go out at the same time, but there's a beauty in how we go out, in what we believe, in what we think in our hearts. How something as beautiful as us being made of stars, and when we die we become one with the universe again, can be just as emotionally satisfying as believing that when we die we're going to go to heaven, and we're going to meet with, we're going to be forgiven for everything. Or the Islam faith, and also the comforting notion that those who have done bad still end up in the same place. That doesn't make them any better than us. And it's
Wow,
just so perfect.
I'm not even sure how I can top that.
I wish I could speak for Crystal. I'm sorry that Crystal isn't here. She's on the she's going to work really early tomorrow, but just to share her thoughts, she was religious more or less her whole life, and she had a crisis of faith. I won't tell her full story. That's for her and her alone. But by the end of this story, by the end of Midnight Mass, she had told me, because she was just floored that I was so moved to tears. We were both crying multiple times during the series, but the end of it had both of us just completely devastated in a good way. And she talked about how she felt that she was lied to with her faith, in the sense that she couldn't understand why these people that preach these faiths, even down to our pastor, just in the sense that for all the good that we preach and everything, how everybody can be so selfish at the end of the day in some minor way or another. And she found this comforting feeling in that nobody is perfect, and that she saw like the impact that it had on me, and it resonated with her, like all the reasons why she went to church. I'm not doing it justice at all. I swear to God, I'm so sorry if Crystal's going to listen to this later on. I'm sorry I'm not doing it justice. And maybe later on we'll get you on here, Crystal, and you can explain it better. But we felt so, it was like our hearts soared at the end of all this. And how even the show, one thing that she noticed was how the show interprets the miracles of God, and how it's not it's not solely biased in the sense that it's purely good, and how even the bad can happen with like these quote unquote gifts from God, such as Aaron losing the baby, juxtaposed with you know, with the child learning how to walk again. And we both kind of did the slight chuckle when at the very end, when they're on the boat, that same girl says, "I can't feel my legs." And instead of breaking down, the Riley's brother and the girl have a slight
almost like a sigh of relief, like it's all over. This nightmare is over.
And how something even as horrific as that, just not being able to walk again, can be seen as a blessing. Like, I'm sorry, I know I hijacked this little bit, but
No, it's fine. I think my final thoughts on the show is, at the end of the day, what this show is ultimately a rejection of cynicism, and a celebration really of faith, but in the more broad sense. And like I said before, this show, better than a lot of other media, it does such a good job of giving everyone with different ideologies a chance to say their piece. One last thing we haven't talked about was the subplot involving the sheriff and his son Ali. And Ali wants to, he wants to go to these this church just out of curiosity. And there's a great back and forth between Ali and his father about if you go to church, but you can't really engage because you are already a part of this one religion. But that's sort of nuance that, that's the sort of nuance you don't really see in other shows that deal with this topic.
Honestly, the closest example I can think of is that South Park episode, Red Hot Catholic Love.
But even then, that's South Park, and they kind of have that.
Yeah,
they have that that edge to them. Even in the episodes that really, that really brown nose the Mormon community. It still has that early 2000s.
Well, it's more about Red Hot Catholic Love specifically because it had all those parents becoming atheists because of the Catholic sex abuse, and then they go on and on about how much they reject religion, how religion is bad, and they're literally shitting out their mouths.
it's a very, that's how bad it can be in the skeptic community.
Yeah,
to the point
I haven't. There's an entire Salon did an entire article recently called "Godless Grifters: How New Atheism Merged with the Far Right," and I'll show you guys. I'll send you the link sometime in the inner circle chat for Renegade Pop Culture. It's a pretty comprehensive list of how much of a cesspool the atheist skeptic movement has been recently.
And you can really tell a lot with like the people in that community who used to identify in that community. Some of them have started to break away from talking about stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like in my mind, one person that sticks out is Chris Raygun, who he used to be very heavy in that, like on a very big level. But in recent days, if you take a look at his content, he's very much moved away from preaching that stuff like that, and even talking about like quote unquote SJW stuff, and more pivots to like just general news as well as mostly video game stuff.
And this is what I was talking about when I said like I personally view atheism as like it's every bit as much a theology as the other organized religions, because to me it comes across as like a defiant God does not exist, whereas like if you're agnostic, or you're just like how I describe myself as spiritual, it's a lot more open-ended, where like a higher power can exist, but it's not always like at the center of your being, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I just want to say too, even though I do, of all the religions, I personally choose Christianity, but in a very broad, non-denominational version of it. I do think, about Christ being the way to heaven. That's my way. Like, that's the one that makes more sense to me personally. But I think God may have different paths for other individuals. I can't know that for sure, but I just know what I believe, and I respect people if they think differently.
Yeah, I mean, as long as everyone respects
I have no
that, like
desire to make the rules of my church a part of civil law. All right, I have absolutely no desire to.
Right.
The second you do that, your faith doesn't become personal. You just want to control other people.
And yeah, I guess I'll end my final thoughts on saying that's exactly what makes Bev Keane one of the better villains of the past however many years, is because she does exactly what we all fear, like how we all fear like hardcore religious zealots to behave. Like they weaponize their beliefs to control others. But what's scary about that is like they are so into their beliefs that that they think themselves as like the hero of the story. And we all know that that's what makes such a compelling villain, is when they think themselves the hero of their own story.
I think it's called main character syndrome sometimes.
Oh yeah.
I've never that's such a perfect description of it.
So any other final thoughts before we wrap this thing up?
Midnight Mass is a very rewarding experience for me. I will try to get more into miniseries, but again, it's not my particular version of storytelling, just because I just don't have enough time to set time aside for individual episodes. That's mainly the reason why, is because I don't have a real consistent schedule. So, but I will try to in the future. I'll try to make it so we talk more about miniseries in the future. But Midnight Mass, this was a very good, better introduction to me to the genre than perhaps previous versions.
I'll go ahead. I'll end by saying, like I said, it's kind of fitting that this is on the marquee, because even taking it 7 hours into consideration, this is my favorite film of the year. And I just want to say this as like a quick side tangent. I swear to God, this is a rant, but not like a full-on like fire and brimstone thing. But I've seen people saying that this isn't a horror story. It's a psychological thriller. I talked about this on my Twitter, but guys, it's a horror. It's so backwards that we're at a point where people don't understand horror anymore, to the point that they have different labels for horrifying moments. You hear it sometimes, like, well, that wasn't a horror so much as a thriller, or I wasn't scared, but I was disturbed. I wouldn't call it scary, but it was thrilling. Like, that's horror. And if you think otherwise, you're proving my point. This is one of the best horror things. You don't have to find it like horror isn't just a sensation that you feel in the moment, like a jump scare. Something like this can be in the same category as Malignant or Hereditary.
Horror is an umbrella term, the same way rock and roll and heavy metal are umbrella terms for a wide variety of variations.
Or even fantasy. Like,
And just because you personally weren't scared by a horror movie doesn't make it any less of a horror movie.
Exactly.
If it's meant to put you in a negative state of mind, it's a horror. Just like a comedy, even if you personally don't find it funny, it's still a comedy.
Like, it amazes me.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, of course it's subjective, but like, if a movie is objectively trying to make you laugh or feel scared, then it's either a comedy or it's a horror. That's it.
No, yeah, you're completely right. It amazes me that this can exist in the same subgenre or even the same genre as something like The Exorcist, Halloween, and Evil Dead. Like, if you think that this isn't a horror, or that things like this aren't a horror because it doesn't have stuff jumping at you, then I want to genuinely know how you feel on animation if you see it as a genre. Because
don't even get me started on that.
That'll tell me everything that you feel as an observer of art. That may have been like a really sour note to end on, but this show's amazing, guys. Like, they really do mean it when they say it's a Rorschach test in every sense of the word.
Mm-hmm.
Of everything that I've seen that Netflix has created, film and TV, this is at the top, right behind American Vandal, BoJack Horseman, and The Five Bloods.
I'm not sure exactly what my Netflix pillars are. If I had to just shoot, like, take a shot in the dark, it would be this and The Haunting of Hill House. I would say The Mitchells versus the Machines, if we're just talking this year, especially.
I forgot they were Netflix. Oh my god.
Centaur World is another fantastic animated show, which Cameron and I have gushed about before. And another Netflix series. What, I'll get back to you on that one.
Okay, just sidebar. Okay, I'm just changing that. Midnight Mass is at number 1, then American Vandal, BoJack Horseman, Mitchells versus the Machines, The Five Bloods, and Stranger Things.
Okay, I think that's a perfect note to end on.
And just under Stranger Things is Hilda.
Ooh, that's good. So that wraps up this podcast. Unfortunately, Haley, her connection kind of crapped out at the last minute, but you can find her on Letterboxd at Haley Kinney. And Josh, where can everyone find you online?
You can find me at Twitter at JSH Lozano, where I regularly post hot takes, get overly emotional over video game reveals, or just in general thirsting over the entire cast of Casino Royale. You can also find me on YouTube at Joshboy64. Please go check out my Blue Beetle video. I worked hard on it, and DC Fandom is coming soon. Please say that you're one of the cool boys who learned about Blue Beetle before it was made into a movie. And you can also check out later on in November, where I will have a video up entitled What Ghostbusters Means to Me. I think that'll be a
look
very
forward to
topical
that.
thing. It's going to be a very topical thing for then. And then you can find me on Instagram at Joshua Lozano64. I stopped posting on there for a while. I didn't post on there the other day because it was just down. And you can find me on Facebook at the Renegade Pop Culture group, where I also wasn't on there the other day because everything was down. And you can check out my editorials on the website. I have a lot of stuff going on up there, and I will have that Midnight Mass editorial up later on in the future, and I'll even have an editorial up later on that's a full-on Silent Hill 2 retrospective.
Nice. Jacob, where can everyone find you?
You can find me on Facebook and Twitter, or Joe Crable, Krehbiel. I also have my Letterboxd account, Streamin Demon, and I'm also part of the Renegade Pop Culture Facebook group.
And you guys can find me on Twitter at Captain K42. You can check out my quick thoughts on letterboxd.com/CoachK42. You can find me in all the various Facebook groups just at my name. You can check out Renegade Pop Culture on Facebook and Twitter at Ren Pop Culture. You can look for us on Podchaser. Listen to all of our podcasts on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen. And last but not least, everything can be found at renegadepopculture.com. Need an escape? So do we. That'll do it for this episode of Renegade Marquee. We will catch you guys later. Peace out.
Yeah.